Katherine of Aragon was Queen of England from her coronation in 1509 and referred to herself as Queen until her death in January 1536. And it is here at the beautiful Peterborough Cathedral that Katherine of Aragon is buried. Every year, the people of Peterborough and Peterborough Cathedral host an event to honour Katherine and the impact she had during her lifetime. So, Tracy, who was Katherine of Aragon?
Well, Katherine of Aragon was the first wife of Henry VIII, our most married monarch. And she had been previously married to Henry's elder brother, Arthur, but he didn't long survive the marriage. So Henry, in a very gallant gesture, decided to sort of rescue this beleaguered Spanish princess and make her his wife. And it was actually a very successful marriage. Of course, we know that he then went on to marry another 5 times, but it was successful and happy for 20 years before it went rather horribly wrong.
Well, based on the circumstances surrounding her later life and how she was treated, a lot of people might assume that Katherine was a victim. Is that something that you subscribe to?
Yes, I think it's, in a way, you can't say she was a victim because of how she behaved. She was very strong. She didn't behave in a sort of embattled way. She was very strong, very principled, stuck to her line that I am the king's true wife. And actually, the vast majority of the population believed she was. But in terms of her fate, she was very much a victim of Henry and his wiles and his need to have a son. That's what drove the whole thing. He would never have sought an annulment from Katherine if she'd given him a living son. But she didn't, very sadly. You know, she had miscarriages, stillbirths, short-lived children. And so for Henry, he was absolutely fixated on Anne Boleyn, wife number 2, who promised, if you marry me, I'll give you a son.
And going back to her early life, she was the daughter of Ferdinand and the formidable Isabella of Spain. What effect did having such a strong and successful mother have on Katherine, do you think?
I think it certainly rubbed off on Katherine. She learned an awful lot from her mother. She saw how Isabella was a warrior queen, you know, heavily pregnant. She'd be marching with the armies, and, you know, it really chiseled Katherine into quite a formidable young lady. And also she was very aware of her pedigree. She was one of the most prestigious brides in Europe, descended not just from the Spanish kings and queens, but other royal families in Europe. So she was a true princess. And of course, the people of England saw her as that too. And it was a case of, who on earth is this interloper, Anne Boleyn? She came from nowhere. Katherine is the true queen.
Well, given what you've just said, why would such an illustrious family as the monarchy of Spain marry their youngest daughter into a new dynasty? The Tudor dynasty was very fresh and unstable. Why would they make that decision?
It was a staggeringly good match for the Tudors, actually. So it was Henry VII, he was on the throne at the time, the first Tudor. But as you say, they're newcomers. Who are these Tudor people? You know, they weren't seen then as they are now as one of our greatest dynasties. So actually, I think England did much better out of this marriage treaty than Spain. It was incredibly prestigious for Henry VII. So of course, he was devastated when it only lasted a few months because his son died. We don't know what from, but he seemed to have been ill for some time. He died just 15 years old. The marriage was only a few months in. And so little wonder that Henry VII then starts to think, how can we keep Katherine in the country? He even considered marrying her himself, but she was so horrified at the prospect that she turned it down. But she did linger on in England, and actually I think she took quite a shine to her late husband's younger brother, Henry. And Henry also thought, wow, you know, the allure of an exotic Spanish princess. He was completely bowled over by her, I think.
And of course, he would have been young and dashing himself at that point in time, wasn't he? And sporty. The marriage contract between Arthur and Katherine, later on, when Katherine was in deep trouble with regards to the divorce, it came up a lot about the consummation of that marriage. based on the fact that Catherine's primary sort of function would be to produce an heir for this unstable dynasty, can we really assume that that consummation didn't take place, given that they were married for, I think it was 5 months by the time that Prince Arthur died?
It's on that marriage night, wedding night, hangs so much of future history, that did they or didn't they? Well, you're absolutely right. In any normal circumstances, the marriage would have been consummated straight away, and 5 months is actually quite a long time to fall pregnant for a young wife. But at the time of the marriage, Arthur was very sickly. He was seen to be very frail on his wedding day. There are rumours, theories that actually he was incapable of marital relations because he was so weak at the time. And I personally set a lot of store by Catherine's own account, because she was an incredibly principled, very devout lady, and she swore time and again, including to her own confessor, that she was still a virgin at the time that she married Henry, that the marriage hadn't been consummated to Arthur. So I do think that is quite compelling evidence.
Yeah, and the fear that was created from religion in that period as well, of course, would have led her to follow that path if it was true, wouldn't
Absolutely,
it? So, what was the legacy that Catherine has left us as a queen in England?
She still has her supporters. I mean, here in Peterborough, of course, her final resting place. But she has seen as this really principled, very, very brave lady who wouldn't bow to considerable pressure from Henry. And I think of all his wives, she's still the one who is most admired. And probably the most popular. So you could say her popularity has never waned in 500 years, which is quite a legacy.
She stood up for her religion, and she was true to her daughter Mary, to make sure that nothing, as far as she was concerned, nothing happened to Mary that she could do anything about. And she was an ambassador. She was the first woman ambassador at the English court. So she was quite a trailblazer that long ago.
I learned a fair bit more about Catherine this evening, which was interesting. For instance, about the way how she, although Henry had treated her really shamefully, actually protected the interests of her daughter and really put the interests of others first. So I think she's a great role model for us to have here in this building.
Catherine's story ends here, at her tomb in Peterborough Cathedral. Catherine inherited her mother's strength and was defined by her beliefs, both morally and spiritually. Although Henry VIII tried to diminish her by referring to her only as the Princess Dowager of Wales, history would come to remember Catherine as a true Queen of England.